Well, welcome everybody. If you are here for the Texas Realtors webinar for navigating the road ahead, you are in the right place. My name is Melissa Hailey. I'm with Agent Advantage Coaching and Training, and today that's what we're talking about is navigating the road ahead. We're going to be talking with our leadership team at Texas Realtors today. So if you're here watching, I would like to quickly introduce Travis Kessler. He is our president and CEO of Texas Realtors. We're also going to be joined by Lori Levy, with the vice president of legal affairs at Texas Realtors, as well as Jef Conn. He is our 2024 chairman of the board for Texas Realtors. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Now, I know we have a ton of stuff to cover. So very, very quickly, I just want to, say thank you for taking time out of your day and coming to speak to everybody. And we have a lot that we want to cover. So can I start with our first question? I think the biggest thing on everybody's mind right now is the new Texas Realtors form changes, and there's been a lot of them. Travis, can you start us off and just give us some background on why we made the changes and why did we do what we did at the time that we did it?
And Melissa, thank you for hosting us. I know Jef and Lori and I are extremely privileged and so glad that you asked us to participate today, because we've been doing this for 8 months and talking about the impact and everything we're doing. That's a lot of activity in an 8-month period. And so Texas Realtor members and all of you on the call today, thank you for your understanding and your diligence at taking all this seriously. It is a big, big issue. It is a change for our industry. Sometimes we get to be creatures of habit, but this is now the time not to be a creature of habit. We all have to learn different ways of communicating and different forms and activities that our legal team will be talking about today as well. So Melissa, I'll start off with just a little bit of background, why we are implementing some of the changes. And then I know, Lori, you're going to be talking about some of the key changes in about 16 revisions of forms and 3 new forms. I know you're not going to cover all of them today, but just an important topic of what we're doing with all the form changes that we're doing. And our 2024 chairman, Jef Conn, is joining us today. And Jef is in his leadership role is going to take from a standpoint of a broker, as a Texas Realtor member, boots on the ground. And so there are a lot of moving parts, Melissa, with this activity. As I mentioned, 8 months since we began work on this when we were served in December of last year. So all of us have been working probably every week, every day, in adjusting, in fine-tuning, educating on compliance because of the lawsuit. And, you asked the question of why are we doing it? Well, it's court ordered. We do have to abide by the terms of a settlement agreement. And I will say we would much rather be in a settlement agreement than litigation. And so we are where we are, and we're in a very positive position. And I attribute that to our organization. We are a resilient group of 150,000 Texas realtors across our state. And Lori and her legal team ought to be commended. I will praise them every day, all day, for all the work, how efficiently they came in and modified these 16 forms that, and plus 3 new ones that we're going to be highlighting over the course of not just this presentation, but in everything we do. So, but why, Melissa? It was all based on the court order of the settlement. We've been living and breathing this for the last 8 months, and these are the terms and conditions that we've all agreed upon to do. And so I'm going to highlight a couple of things in this background just to give it perspective of what Jef and Lori will highlight from a broker standpoint and from a legal standpoint. But we are ahead of the curve, Melissa. We're doing everything as early as we can. We jumped ahead. We were one of the first states to put our forms online. In fact, June 24th, we put our forms online on our statewide platform called Zip Forms. They are out there. And I know Lori and Jef are going to say this, but I'm going to say it because you're going to hear it over and over again. And that is, we did it early. We wanted to make sure that we were prepared. We want to work through the details, the nuances. And I'll say this is that what you see today, what's on our platform, everything we're doing is still subject to change. I mean, we are hearing from our members. We hear from you every day of what you have to do. We are working with our local boards and their MLSs on the changes they had to make in their MLSs to accommodate the settlement.
Yeah.
So we just prepared early, Melissa, to be able to accommodate what we know we have to do by a specific date. So let me say this from a background standpoint for all those listening, and I know you probably have heard this, but this lawsuit was all based on what is called the Sitzer-Burnett case. It was out of Missouri. We were named in Texas as a copycat lawsuit. The copycat lawsuit involved us and 62 defendants in our state. So even though it was a copycat lawsuit, it was all part of this umbrella of the bigger picture of Sitzer-Burnett. And so all of that was based on a conspiracy, or they say it was a conspiracy to inflate commissions through our rules, our policies, our cooperative compensation requirement that we had at our multiple listing services across the country. So all of those are the ingredients of what I will call, in the court of public opinion, we did not prevail. We can argue all day long that we probably have the best forms in the country. We have an information about brokerage services form. We have listing agreements, buyer rep agreements. Our forms are full of disclosure and transparency. But nevertheless, in the court of public opinion, we were found in violation of antitrust provisions on what they say was our attempt to inflate commissions based on our rules and policies, especially when it relates to cooperative compensation. So here are a couple of key dates. Lori's slide that she has up here really talks about the background of where we are. But March 15th was a key date for us, and that's not that long ago. And March 15th, the Realtor organization reached a potential settlement for the industry. And that industry settlement did include Texas when that first came out in March. And so again, settlement versus litigation, we would rather be in settlement versus litigation. So in that March 15th date, the court looked at it and said, to do this, you're going to have changes in your MLS rules. There will be damages that will be paid in order to, and for you all to have a release of liability. So March 15th was a game changer for us. And this chart that timeline that Lori has on here is just critical. And I want to highlight for the background purpose, Melissa, that March 15th and the notice to withdraw where we were in all of these preliminary approvals that stretch from March to April. But here's where we are that I think was a pivotal date. And that was on June the 18th. The courts, the judges, and the parties all accepted the terms of the settlement agreement, all of the conditions. And so part of that settlement, that was a key date for us because, Melissa, on June the 18th, our plaintiffs and impacting our 62 defendants here had to make a decision whether they were going to accept the terms of the settlement or whether they would just go out on their own and keep this as an active litigation for Texas. Our plaintiffs in Texas did agree by June 18th that they would be and would agree to the settlement as presented. So that took us out of litigation on that date. And so then the next date that we're looking at is August the 17th. And August the 17th is when all of our forms have to go into place and all those forms have to be in place. August 17th has not happened yet, but we're just, Melissa, a few weeks away from that. Such an important timeline for where we are in this. We jumped ahead of the curve so that we could be prepared for August the 17th. But all of you who are listening to this webinar today, yes, all those forms are active, but that is the court-ordered settlement by August the 17th to have it. But everybody, I know you're statewide on this, you've got to check with your local board and your local MLSs. They have until August the 17th as well to modify the terms, the conditions, all the information in the multiple listing service to be in compliance with the settlement as well. Some of our boards have already done this. Some of the MLSs are already in good shape. But I will tell you with across the state, as large as Texas is, I'm sure that not all of our MLSs are in compliance as of today. But keep in mind that is August the 17th is when that all has to be in place. And so the other date on here that is critical, it does not go away. November 26th, kind of towards the end of the year, is when it is targeted for a final hearing for final approval of the settlement. So while everybody is in agreement with where we are today, it still takes the court for a final approval of this hearing. So I'm going to give you, and I know Lori and Jef are going to highlight some of this in their material, but texasrealestate.com/lawsuit and facts.realtor are your go-to places. Everything we're talking about, everything we're doing, we've got videos, we've got explanations, all are on one of those two websites. So texasrealestate.com/lawsuit and facts, FACTS.realtor are the core aspects of this. But if we look at this settlement, Melissa, and I'm going to set this up for Lori to talk about some of our forms now, that is the core aspects of this settlement. Number one, we had to get a release of liability. That was important for the industry. So all realtors are released under this settlement, our members, our associations, and our MLSs. Because it was class action, there are damages. I will tell you that the damages, if we total everything across the country, not just Texas, but that damage is about a $2 billion settlement between the realtor organization, our non-realtor MLSs, and brokers over and in excess of $2 billion in sales volume in 2021, 2022, all as ordered by the court. So damages is a core ingredient of the settlement agreement. Number three is that offers of compensation have to be removed from the MLS. There is a prohibition under this settlement of offers of compensation in the multiple listing service. The fourth aspect of this is critical, and that is written buyer agreements are required prior to showing a property. So those are the critical aspects of where we are, Melissa, as far as the background of why we did it and when we did it to get ahead of the curve here. But I want to say this because I know Jef and Lori are going to reinforce this as well, because we are living this every day. Just because the court has accepted where we are in the settlement agreement, the Department of Justice, known as the DOJ, they're still looking at our organization. They have had the opportunity to reopen the investigation as we speak now. So they are not done with examining what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So they are looking at our forms that we're posting. They have probably links to our forms. And that's why I emphasize that we may not be through with the final revisions of our forms, because the DOJ may still have some implications based on how we're implementing the terms of the settlement agreement. And so, Melissa and attendees to the webinar, I'll end with this, and that is that while the DOJ and the National Association of Realtors met, we have been given some really good information by the DOJ as to what we need to do, what we need to pay attention to. Number one, in that discussion with the Department of Justice, we have to change and update our forms to make sure and ensure that we have clear, stronger transparency and how compensation works for the benefit of the consumer. To me, that's what we've always done, but that is what the DOJ is looking at even today to make sure that we are transparent, and it's clear, and a consumer can understand this real estate transaction. Number two is that the DOJ said you have to stay away from workarounds. Our group is always very creative in looking at what they can do to express and communicate how they do business. That is being an independent contractor, and every brokerage gets to make the decision, Melissa, of what they do and how they do it. That's what we do in this business called real estate. And so the DOJ has said stay away from workarounds. And so, we've got to pay attention to that, because it's very important that we not look at ways of having workarounds on how you display and how you post your compensation. We just can't do it through the multiple listing service. Number three in this DOJ discussion is that the watching out for is the consumer has to have the ability to negotiate and mutually agree upon to the types of services they want and what the brokerage is willing to charge for that compensation for delivering that service on what the brokerage provides. And so again, that's kind of the background, Melissa, of where we are and why we have proactively jumped ahead of the curve here to make sure that we understand and that you as realtors understand the importance of the compliance. And so Lori, again, thank you to you and your team. Lori's our general counsel and has done an outstanding job with her team in revising and updating the forms that we have to be in compliance with this. And so, Lori, I know in this length of time that we have today, you're going to highlight a few of those forms, but I'm going to turn it over to you and let you begin the highlights of what those forms look like.
Thank you, Travis. I put the timeline back up here because I want to talk about the timeline of the forms. Travis mentioned that we've had our forms posted since June 24th. You really need to go look at the forms. If you haven't taken a class yet on them, please do. I would say 2 hours on the forms alone is necessary. Not that it's massive changes to the forms, but it's a change to your practice. And so we've tried to update the forms to reflect the opportunities you have for what that practice looks like. We're not dictating exactly what you have to do going forward, but we're ensuring you don't do those things that you can no longer do under the settlement agreement. So we put them out on June 24th. We might see a couple of updates in the coming weeks based on some feedback we've gotten. We are watching the DOJ closely to see if they issue any more statements, as Travis talked about. But what you really need to do is check with your local MLS. What is the date that they are changing the way cooperation on the MLS works? Under the new rules, there's a different definition of cooperation. It no longer includes compensation. Some MLSs are taking a two-step approach, no longer requiring you to put in offers of compensation, but not removing it yet. Some are going to remove it all in one fell swoop. So the date that they need to do that by is August 17th, but it may be that they do that earlier. Our updated forms, the Texas Realtors Representation Agreements, work with updated MLS rules. So they also work with MLSs that have not changed the rules yet. So if your MLS has not yet changed its rules, which they need to do by the 17th of August, it's okay. You can still use our updated agreements with the current MLS rules. I want to mention, let me get to my slide. One important form is the Amendment to Representation Agreement. This is TXR 2701. This is your easy button. If you have a client for which you have signed a representation agreement already on the pre-June 24th version, so it is not in compliance with the updated MLS rules, you can amend that agreement with this one-page document. So you do not have to have your client sign a whole new agreement. You're going to need to do this if on August 17th, that client has not gone under contract to buy or sell a home. If they have already gone under contract and they're under the previous representation agreement, both buyer's rep and listing agreement, you don't have to do anything. Once that client's under contract to buy or sell a home, you don't have to update your representation agreement. But if they're still shopping, haven't had their house, hadn't had an offer they've accepted on their house, you do need to go ahead and update it, and you can use this form for that purpose. We tried to make an easy button. This is important. One of the main things that came out of the settlement was the requirement for disclosures, the assurance that clients, that customers knew that commissions are negotiable and that they have a choice in that matter. I will always add to that brokers set their fees independently. But when you look at the terms of the settlement agreement, they really focus on the fact that commissions are not set by law or by any association or MLS. But we want to make sure that you all know and that the consumers learn that brokers do set their fees independently. Brokers can dictate to their sponsored sales agents what that's going to be. So within your brokerage, you need to be talking about how you, not only the fee you're going to charge, but how that is going to be done. And so we have, I'm not going to go into the listing agreements or buyer representation agreements, but look at those 1101, 1501. We have updated those to be in compliance with these new disclosures. We have updated them to ensure that the customer, your client, that seller or buyer is authorizing your brokerage fees. That is what is key here. I will note 1507. See how quickly I can get to it, is a new form. It is a short form for buyer's representation agreement. One of the specific requirements of the settlement is that MLS participants have to have a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring residential property. That's kind of new for us in Texas. We know that agents took clients out all the time, may not have gotten a buyer's rep signed prior to touring a home. I hope they got it signed at some point. I always say that we have used buyer representation agreements in Texas for a long time. This short form can help you get there. If you look at on this screen, there is a choice here for full services or showing services under paragraph 5. You can still use this one-page form for full buyer's representation. It doesn't have all of the same protections that our 5-page 1501 has, but it does meet all the requirements. Under paragraph 5, that second box is showing services. This is intended to help you get a form signed as required if you're an MLS participant by a buyer before touring a home. It is just for that showing. You'll hear NAR in the settlement talk about the phrase touring a home. We call that showing in Texas, so we went with the word showing here. You can do 1 home, 2 homes, a neighborhood, a block. You can do a county. You can make that agreement last for 1 hour or 1 day. This is another easy button that we've tried to provide so that all of our members can easily be in compliance with the new requirements of the MLS. I should say again that check with your MLS on any local requirements. We're hearing that some may be defining when you have to have this. The MLSs enforce the settlement agreement. All of the terms of the settlement agreement are now mandatory MLS rules. So NAR dictates those rules, but local MLSs could go above and beyond. So while the MLS rules do require a written agreement with the buyer for residential homes, you need to check with your MLS to see what additional rules they may have adopted to get to that point. Another form that I want to mention, and bear with me as I get to it, is 2406. This is also a new form. Let me back up for just a moment and talk about TREC. We're getting the question about TREC, the TREC 1 to 4 contract. It still mentions MLS in there as a way that a broker may have gotten paid. TREC updates their forms. They promulgate the sales contracts. They have to take a little bit longer to do that. Melissa is on the broker lawyer committee at TREC. That is the forms writing group that the commissioners utilize in order to update their forms. That group meets 4 to 6 times a year. TREC commission meets 4 times a year. They have to go through what's called a rulemaking process in order to update their forms. The TREC commission first has to propose updated forms, put them out for public comment for a minimum of 30 days, and then adopt them. If they're only meeting 4 times a year, you can imagine there's a 3-month space in between those meetings. So they have begun their work to consider changes to the residential sales contracts based on the fact that brokers will not be sharing compensation in the MLS. That's just the way it had always been done. And even though TREC is the regulatory entity, their forms did recognize that there was an MLS and that their license holders shared commission that way. So that's not being done anymore. The earliest that I think we'll see any changes from TREC are the end of the year or the beginning of next year. They meet August 19th. They do plan to propose changes at that time. The earliest they could adopt those would be at their November meeting. So we've got a while before any changes occur in the TREC contracts. For that reason, we created TXR 2406. This is the addendum regarding brokers' fees. You'll notice that some of the language in here talks about previous written agreements. This is not intended to take the place of a representation agreement that discusses compensation or other agreements that we provide for you, the compensation agreement between brokers. You're still welcome to use that, 2402, and this can recognize that. A lot of folks are moving toward seller concessions. I know concessions is not a word that's in the TREC forms, but that's the term that we use. A lot of the MLSs, I think, are adding a button, a field for seller concessions or seller contributions that a seller might pay toward buyer's expenses. Now, on the MLS, that cannot refer to or be contingent upon that money going toward broker fees. But outside of the MLS, a seller can offer an amount of money that on behalf of the buyer to pay those buyer broker fees. Because the TREC contract currently doesn't have that, 2406 in paragraph D2, seller can authorize here, I'm going to pay this amount for buyer broker fees. We have additional places for the listing broker to do that as well. The issue is that you're now going to have some options. I've heard some brokers don't want to use this form. They're just going to use special provisions to offer additional seller contributions outside of paragraph 12, and that's fine. Although I never easily say that's fine to use special provisions because it can get challenging. Do not practice law, but have your parties tell you what they want to do and how they want to do that. But you have options now. And I think that's the part that's confusing. What we've done here is try to create easy button avenues for you to get where you need to be so that you can be compensated for the work that you're doing as agents in transactions. So 2406 may be updated or even go away in the future, depending on what TREC adopts. I can tell you that right now, what they will be considering is an additional concessions line in the contract. They are not at this time going to introduce their own addendum. That is still something they're considering and may even come at a future date. They are on record as saying they're glad that we did this, and they're going to be watching this to see how it's utilized out in the field. Is it doing what it needs to do? Their goal is to protect consumers. Our goal has always also been to protect consumers, to ensure that there's transparency, but also to protect you as members, to ensure that you have the agreements you need to do your business. So that's what we've tried to do with this 2406. There are, as Travis said, 16 forms that we've updated and 3 new forms. I'm not going to go through them today, but please go take a class on this if you haven't yet done that. And I'll stop there, Melissa, because once I get started on forms, it's hard to stop.
I feel you. I teach some of those contracts classes, and I'm the same way. Once I get started on them, it's hard for me to stop. So thank you, though, so much for just pointing out so much great information about the fact that, yes, you need to go take the contracts classes, and yes, you have options as well as the consumer. I think that's really the overarching piece, right? Is that consumers need to have these choices. And because it's this big overhaul, I mean, it's the largest overhaul I think that realtors have had in the way we do business in, well, I don't even know how long, a long time. So I guess let me ask another question, because with all of these changes, it seems like the most important thing that a realtor can do right now is really to make sure that they stay updated. Like you said, they need to get the training on how to use the new forms. Are there resources that are available from Texas Realtors to help their members, to help the realtor member just navigate this road ahead as they move forward? What might we use for something like that? Where would I send people?
Melissa, I can take that one. You could start by going to texasrealestate.com/lawsuit. That's your one-stop shop for all of the lawsuit information. You'll see some older data when we were first getting into the lawsuit and some forms that you could share with clients, but you also see some more up-to-date information. So that website, along with facts.realtor that Travis talked about earlier, is the most up-to-date on what's going on with the lawsuit. Now, all this seems a little overwhelming, but at the end of the day, our job as brokers is just to represent our clients, whether they're the seller or the buyer, And maybe we have to do a little bit better job of explaining how agency works and how we get paid. But ultimately, our job is still the same, help them achieve their real estate goals. So it's not earth-shattering. It's just we have to do a few things differently. You heard Lori talk about the classes that even you, Melissa, teach. If you go to texasrealestate.com and search on the website for the professional development and education, you can see tons of classes that you can take from the comfort of home or office on Zoom, where you can learn about all the forms. And there's a lot of information to learn. So maybe you take one and realize, I need a little bit more information. Go back and take another one, because we all need to understand what these changes mean, why they're important, and more importantly, how to explain that to our clients, because they're not seeing the forms every day like we are. We have to take down that barrier, explain it to them, and make their transactions a little bit easier. If you're a broker, make sure you're having office meetings and talking to your agents. And if you're an agent, make sure you're going to those meetings, because brokers are going to make sure that their agents are doing the right thing and following the rules. Now, I live in Lubbock. We have people here from Dallas, other people from Austin on the call. Every MLS is handling changes differently. So make sure you understand the rules of your MLS. And if you're a member of multiple MLSs, you may need to know what the nuances are between the two. So make sure you attend those meetings at your office and at your board office to make sure you understand what you need to do to stay in compliance, because it is the MLS who's going to oversee this, but it's ultimately up to us as agents to make sure that we are doing what we need to do. And as brokers, we need to make sure our agents are doing that as well. And last thing I'll mention as a resource is the Texas Realtor Conference is coming up in August. I said August, not September. It's a little earlier this year. It will be at the Gaylord in Grapevine, August 25th to 28th. I'm sure Lori and her team will have lots of legal updates. There'll be information about forms. If you want to know what's going on with Texas Realtors, the quickest and fastest way, other than doing things on Zoom, is come to that conference, get a lot of information in a short amount of time. And there's even some CE credit for those who attend. But remember those two websites, texasrealestate.com/lawsuit and fax.realtor.
And Melissa,
Yes.
Melissa, if I could, I just want to kind of jump off where Jef was talking about the texasrealestate.com/lawsuit page. We've done a lot of work. The legal team and the marketing and communications team have done a lot of work to kind of transform that from the litigation update to tools for how the settlement will play out and how the MLS rules will play out. We've got frequently asked questions there about the settlement as well as about the forms. We've got videos there. David Jones and I did about a 45-minute video. It's a little bit less than that on the forms changes. That's an easy one-stop place to just kind of get the gist of the forms changes. That's posted there. We actually still have red lines of the forms changes posted there. We usually pull red lines down once forms are adopted, but those forms changes are still there on that page, so you can see that as well. And then the new thing that we just started doing are short 2 to 3 minute videos. I hope you all know about our video webinar series that we had done previously on hotline questions. Those were forms, other things as well. This new series is just 2 to 3 minutes on a particular form. What's the number one question we're getting on that form? Let's just put a video up so people can go see it. We love doing these live presentations, but we're not always available. So we're trying to put as much of this recorded information or written information there. We also have some explainer sheets for a couple of the forms, as well as a flow chart for 2406. We know that form is brand new and may be confusing, so there's a flow chart posted there. So anything that we can think of, any way that we can share information. We're also working on flyers for you all to hand your clients that will help you explain a topic to your client, will be on that page. So keep that bookmarked and check back often.
I love it. I didn't know we were getting the new ones, but I really love those explainer sheets because they tell you, here's what goes in these blanks. And so if you didn't take the class, you at least have something to start with. So thanks for doing that, Lori. I appreciate it. I do think this, I think between all of the stuff we've talked about, and we've already hit a lot of stuff, even just in the short 30 minutes we've been together, I think everybody feels overwhelmed. I think the agents are overwhelmed by the changes. I think the brokers are overwhelmed by, what's happening. And as a broker, Jef mentioned this. He said, brokers need to be plugged in and the agents need to go to their broker meetings and participate. I would love to know if anybody here, any of the three of you would like to take this. Do you have any advice for brokers maybe they sponsor realtors and they don't really know what to do next. They don't understand all of the ways this is going to impact their business from a brokerage perspective. So they're maybe not putting things in place ahead of time to be proactive for their agents, and they should be. But I think it's just overwhelming. So I don't know. Do you have any recommendations for things they might try?
Melissa, I think agents and brokers have one thing in common is they need to understand what the changes are. So but brokers can't expect their agents to understand it if they don't understand it. So brokers should take the classes, learn what the changes are, and then after understanding what those changes are, look at their policies and procedures for their office. Do they have forms that are required? I know in my brokerage, whenever we have closings and listings, there's certain things we have to do. Make sure that a buyer rep agreement is one of those things that are there. And as brokers, you're probably going to have to spot check from time to time and say, are we getting buyer reps like we are obligated to do so? Will people skip that step? Probably, because our group likes to work around that, but no one who's on this call, because we're going to do things the right way. So as a broker, you're going to have to decide how you're going to monitor that. It's not a problem until that form's not there, and then it's a big problem. So make sure that you are following the rules and that your agents are following the rules. And sometimes some good old accountability is the only thing that will get there. Make sure that you are, as a broker, you have your compensation agreements updated, because sometimes people will be able to charge for the services of opening a home. Not every company does that. It's a business decision. Make sure that you as a brokerage have that set up in a way for your agents to receive the fees, because brokers are the ones who get the fees, even if it's passed through to the agent. So make sure that your policies and procedures are set up to allow for that type of compensation. Texas Realtors has model policies that you can find on our website. The legal team has done a fantastic job. So if you need to understand what other people are doing, then look to what Texas Realtors is suggesting. One thing that I like to do is I like to have friends from around the state where I can call and say, I've got a question that I'm not necessarily calling my neighbor or competitor down the street. I'm calling someone in a different market who doesn't know parties who are involved. If you come to that Texas Realtors conference next month, make sure you meet brokers from other parts of the state and form a relationship and say, do you mind if I call you if I have questions? Then you can bounce ideas with someone who's in the field just like you without them being down the street. You're not going to see these people at church or the grocery store. You're just going to do your business, and you can learn a lot from them. And hopefully you'll be able to share some information that will share with their office as well. There's a lot of things going on that are only complicated by what the media is spitting out. It's loud, and when this settlement is finalized, there's probably going to be another round of media about what this means. We have to be really good as brokers explaining everything to our agents so that they can explain it to their clients about what all these changes means and how to still do business. Because at the end of the day, there's still a lot of real estate that needs to be sold, both commercial and residential. Our clients still need us to understand what's going on. So take a deep breath, learn what you need to do. You've got time to learn it before these changes go into effect on August 17th, but it's up to us as brokers to make sure that the agents are informed.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And you said something that made me think of something else that I heard, because you mentioned the media and how they're putting things together. And I think Travis mentioned something about Texas Realtors having some PR stuff. Travis, do you mind sharing that? That's probably new information for anybody who's watching today. Do you mind chatting about it?
Yeah, Melissa, good question. And, for many, many weeks and months, we were often asked, why are we not out there messaging and refuting what's in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the negative publicity that we were hearing about the real estate industry, our profession, what you all do well every day. As a result of that discussion, I want to make this statement. The reason we didn't proactively start messaging during that time was that we were involved in active litigation. That is not the time to start refuting what the media was putting in there. That's just adding fuel to the fire. So we waited until after we were out of the litigation phase, which was June the 18th. And once we got into the process where we are, we hired our public relations agency to help us with messaging. And keep in mind that the consumer knows a whole lot less than we know as the industry and what we're doing, Melissa, with webinars like you're doing for us and our industry today. As a result, we are allocating, and I'm saying allocating several $1 million out of our operating and our funds that we have to be able to now proactively look at messaging. We do studies all day long on what sellers and buyers expect from you as a Texas Realtor. And so we have a high confidence level by the consumers of what you do every day in working with the consumers that we call buyers and sellers. So as a result, now that we're in that settlement phase, and now as we get into the end of summer, getting into the fall, we are going to, Melissa, actively start promoting our assets and our collateral of a value proposition of what a realtor does for the benefit not only of our own industry, realtor to realtor messaging and of value, but we are going to message to the consumer as well. Whether it's digital advertising, whether it's influencer on social media, advertising, or just media buys that we're doing. We're in the process of finalizing what we call assets and collateral, and we will be ready to roll out what I think you all as a Texas Realtor member expect from your state level organization to actively promote and highlight what we're doing to give that higher confidence level to the consumer to know and understand what you're going through every day.
I love that. Can I just make sure that I have it clear, and for everybody listening, it's separate from the NAR campaign that we've done, on and off over the years, where they do That's Who We Are, and that's the NAR, realtor value proposition. This is a Texas level, right?
Melissa, this would be ours that we're doing from a Texas standpoint to personalize it based on the research that we've done of what the buyers and sellers in Texas expect from their Texas realtor. So yes.
I love that. I'm not sure any other states doing it, but I always knew Texas was where I needed to be. I may just be a Texas girl at heart. Well, thank you for that, Travis. And thanks, Jef, for all of your good info on, where brokers should be going for resources and stuff. I think there's just so much happening, but we're talking about all these things that are changing, and there is a lot that's changing for sure. But sometimes what I find is, people don't love change. And I think sometimes realtors need to hear there's stuff that's staying the same, that not everything in your whole world is just going crazy. There's a lot happening, but some things stay the same. Businesses continue to move forward. I think, Jef, you kind of mentioned that. We may feel like it's the end of the world, but it's not. What, Lori, if you don't mind, I'd like to just start with you. What are your thoughts on what's staying the same and not making changes that's in our profession that we just need to be mindful of?
There's so many things that we could start with in this discussion. I'm going to start with an easy one because I saw a question come through about our Texas Realtors Brokers Policies and Procedures Manual. That is actually staying the same. So I thought I'd answer that question to your question. That Broker Policies and Procedures Manual really only tracks the TREC, either statutory or rules requirements. Nothing in there changes based on this settlement agreement or the updated MLS rules. So that is one thing, Melissa, that's staying the same. But to really answer your question, the value that agents provide to their customers, their clients, the sellers and the buyers, landlords and tenants, that's not changing.
Yeah.
The transactions are not changing. The way in which brokers receive their compensation, that may change a little. I think I've said it a lot. I think I said it before this call started, that the forms themselves, even though there's 16 updates and 3 new forms, it's not a lot of changes in there. Very little red ink on the updated forms. Now, it's funny because for me as the lawyer, I'm like, oh, there's not a lot changing here. This is not a big deal. But for you all as the brokers and the agents, it can be a lot. As Melissa's been saying, it's a lot. But it's the practice, and brokers can control how they want to operate in this new way of doing things. And so there may be a different way that you advertise that you're willing to share compensation. There's a new way to communicate that your seller is willing to consider contributions to the buyer to pay for buyer brokers fees. So there are new ways of doing things, and there's a little bit to learn on what you can and can't do. You cannot advertise compensation on the MLS. You can't utilize the MLS to advertise otherwise. So a lot of the questions we are getting are about those changes, but do not forget for 1 minute that what isn't changing is the value that you all bring to your clients in the real estate transaction. These are still, for the residential buyers and sellers, the largest transaction that they make in their life. That's not changing. I think Travis said it earlier about that the consumers aren't paying attention to this the way that we are. They don't know a lot of what's going on. They may not do a lot of transactions over their lifetime. They may not remember when they bought their house 20 years ago how that worked. So be cognizant of that. Also, as general counsel, I really have to say this, that the one thing that should not change is that in your listing presentation, or when you're meeting a buyer for the first time, obviously there are certain requirements of you in sharing the IABS, stating who you represent, things like that. But there are also those conversations that you should have been having and should continue to have. Who do you represent? How do you get paid? Sit down with that representation agreement and explain it to your client. That remember who started some of this. The plaintiffs in the lawsuits were home sellers, and in other suits they were home buyers who had realtor agents. Make sure that you are being transparent, and that's something that we had always, just like the value proposition, we've always talked about that. It's always been there. So those things are not changing. Our goal as your association was to update and provide you new tools for this new way of doing things.
And Melissa, Lori said that well. If you have full transparency in communication with what you have always done as a Texas Realtor member, it's no different than what you're doing today. But the only thing that really changed is how we do it. Just has to be not using and via the MLS. And what's new and different would be the 19 forms that Lori referred to. But Lori, if you would go, there's a slide in our deck called Consumer Choice. And Melissa, based on what you said about what has not changed in what we do, I think the very first one on here is that one of the things that didn't change, one of the most important aspects of this settlement, is that it preserves the ability for listing agents to compensate buyer agents. That is not new. That is the way we've always been able to do it. But that's one of the most important aspects of this settlement, is that it preserves that ability to do what we have done in the past. It just can't be via the MLS. It cannot be part of your policies within the structure and regulations and what you show in the multiple listing service. But number two, the other thing on this list that has not changed is that cooperative compensation benefits both buyers and sellers in the eyes of our profession. And number three is that for buyers, this whole thing promotes access to representation through the home buying process. Again, that is not new. Buyer representation has always been encouraged for as long as we've all been around and working with buyers. And number four, we have always had this belief, and this is no different pre versus post settlement. And that is that for sellers, cooperative compensation helps broaden the pool of prospective buyers. That is not new. That is just the way we've always done business. And so that cooperative compensation off MLS and not advertising compensation in MLS is the only change. We've always supported that cooperative compensation does give both parties greater choices. And number five, something else that has not changed post settlement, and that is that written buyer agreements help promote transparency. And we have always been a proponent of buyer representation agreements and the use of it. Now it's just part of the settlement. But Melissa, if we've been doing business the way we've been doing business, those 5 points are not new.
I agree 100%. Jef, what about you? Do you find that some things change, but some things stay the same?
I feel like the way we do business overall is going to stay pretty much the same, but I have a tip for everybody. If you want to understand how to work in a world where commissions are not on a simple MLS form, call a commercial agent. Because for 17 years, I've had to do every deal without the benefit of an MLS where that was listed. And so compensation is discussed beforehand, or it's written in offers. So call your realtor friends that are commercial agents. And if you don't know some of them, get to know them, because they're great assets for you, but they can help you learn how they do business, which will help you on the residential side.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what I love is that you mentioned communication. And that's something that's huge on my heart right now, is that realtors need to be really buttoned up with their communication with each other and with their consumer, because if we communicate better about all of this with our consumer, it's good. But boy, we need to communicate with each other, because that's what you commercial agents have been doing, right? Lots of communication. All right. Well, I know that we have just a little bit more time, and I feel like we've covered an awful lot of stuff with regards to the settlement and the proposed settlement and all of the things that are happening. Can we shift the conversation a tiny bit and kind of look more towards the future? Is that okay with everybody today? Everybody's good? Okay. Let's talk about, as we do navigate this road ahead, you know, next year, as we get into January, we're in a new legislative session in Texas. And I gotta think that there's going to be some key issues that maybe TREPAC's going to be focused on, or some things that Texas Realtors believes that we need to be mindful of as we move into the future, and things that maybe they don't have to do with this particular topic that we've been on with the contracts and all of that, but things that still impact our business on a day-to-day level. What are some things that you guys see that's coming forward into 2025 that maybe are agenda items we need to be aware of?
So it is going to be a legislative year, and for those who don't know, every other year for 140 days is technically when we're in session, but it gets extended and extended and extended. So right now it's an off year. We're in the process of reevaluating what our legislative priorities will be, and that's done through our public policy committees. And so they are working together to get a big list, and you will probably get an email soon that says, do you have anything to say about ETJs or county restrictions or city restrictions? There's lots of things to comment on. We really need your information on those. So if you have experience or stories, that helps us build cases to support or not support rules or laws that may be proposed at the Texas Capitol. And as we get ready to kick off next year, there's going to be some things from last year that are going to pop up. Y'all may have heard about the foreign buyers bill. I'm here in Austin today, and tomorrow morning we'll be up the street of the Capitol testifying in a hearing about that, because there was a few different versions of the same thing prohibiting foreign investment in Texas. Now, it was sometimes around ag land, sometimes about all kinds of real estate, specifically around countries that provided national security risks. So China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. But I think we can all agree that not having a Chinese-owned farm next to a military installation is probably a good thing. However, if someone immigrated to Texas and their daughter is at the University of Texas and they want to buy a condo for her, that probably should be allowed. So there's an individual aspect that we as agents don't want to get involved in, and that's called discrimination. We don't want to have to start our conversations with, hello, I'll use Lori as an example. Hello, Lori, I'd love to help you with your real estate. What country are you from? Immediately that throws up a barrier. We're doing things that are against federal law, by the way, and we're discriminating. So we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen to protect consumers, but also to protect our agents. Travis, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, Melissa, Jef highlighted something that he said every other year we're in a legislative session. That is true, but I would say we're never out of a legislative session. The fact that Jef is in Austin today, from being in Lubbock and living in Lubbock and being in Austin today and tomorrow to testify, these interim charges are so important. So a legislative session is just never goes away. So we are working right now with interim charges, especially from the House side. And very, very important to keep up with what some of those issues are. And Jef said it well. We have public policy positions that we work for in our statements, our positions a year in advance, so that we're prepared that when we go into session in January, we are prepared to take positions and make statements and have testimony on key issues. But Melissa, I think Jef is right. I think there's several things that are going to come back that the legislature did not finish last time. One of those is HOA legislation. We made tremendous progress 2 sessions ago in trying to codify and register and put cost limitations on some things with caps. And all of that, we made a lot of progress. But during the last legislative session, they adjourned before the governor would sign any legislation impacting Part 2 of HOA legislation. Our intent would be that we've got to bring in condos to the same level of regulation as on the residential side. And so you're going to see some aspects of HOA Part 2 in this next upcoming legislative session. One of the big issues, and Lori, you deal with this every day and working with the Land Title Association, and it's deed and lease fraud that we're having. Our legislature now is well aware through interim hearings of the problems. And if you've not been following what we're calling deed and lease fraud, it's seller impersonation for the most part, and taking advantage of things that are just not the way we would do that legally. And so part of that is putting some early notifications in the process, and really from a squatter issue of what is the difference between trespassing versus having a legitimate lease, even if that lease is not is fraudulent. There are aspects of trespassing versus what you have to do with evictions. Trespassing, you can get law enforcement engaged. In evictions, you have to go through the JP court. So as a result of that, we potentially could see some deed and lease fraud legislation coming from that. We will also have wholesaling. Wholesaling will also be a big part of that, looking at disclosure, more disclosure, looking at possible licensure of that. It's a growing issue. We've been looking at that wholesaling issue for the last 2 legislative sessions, and we do think that will have a bearing in this upcoming session as well. And last but not least, I think we'll always look at what's next on property tax relief. We had the largest tax relief package in the history of our state. And so they're not done. We still have things to refine, look at what's working, what's not working. And so property tax relief, property tax part 2 of this will be a continual discussion item for this next legislative session. But Melissa, one thing to highlight, March 26th is Realtor Day at the Capitol for next year. So many of the attendees, whether we get 3,000, 3,500 attendees at a Realtor Day at the Capitol, 50% of our members coming to that have never been to the state capitol. 50% of attendees have never been to your Texas Realtors building right across the street from the state capitol. So mark it on your calendar, March 26th, Realtor Day at the Capitol.
I love that. All right. Well, I think Realtor Day at the Capitol is a great opportunity to come down and spend the day down in Austin, but also for those of us, I don't know about everybody coming from close to Austin, but boy, those of us coming from North Texas, we hop on a bus with the rest of our realtor friends and you get some great networking for about 3.5 or 4 hours on your way down and back. So it's a little bit of a long day, but man, it's such good stuff that we cover. So I'm just so thankful that we have great leadership at Texas Realtors. And I know we've had so much to cover today. There's just so much stuff for realtors to know right now. There's so much happening. There's change going on, but again, things are staying the same. I really, really love that Jef brought up the conference. Jeff's, when's the conference? Will you tell us one more time? Tell when and where and how do we sign up? Like, get us hooked up to go to that conference.
It is August 25th through the 28th. And if I said that date wrong, someone correct me. And in the chat, you can see a link, I think that Kara did, where you can see all the registration. Emmett Smith's going to be there. And it's going to be a great conference, lots of fun, tree pack events, lots of education. Make sure you sign up and go. You're going to learn a lot there.
Yeah, I love that because that's the best advice, right? Is realtors get plugged in, stay plugged in, get into a place where you're participating at your local board with your broker. Come to the Texas Realtors Conference. And certainly the more that you stay plugged in, the more you're going to be prepared when you are with that consumer and you're having those conversations and you need to know what's happening. So I love it that we have so much going on at the state level that's helpful for the realtors with our forums, our education, our advocacy, all of these things. And really more than anything, I'm just so thankful that everybody that's here today, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I know that everybody's busy. I mean, Jef, you're testifying. Thank you guys so much. And let me just put this on here real quick so everybody has some information about who's here in case you want to connect with Texas Realtors. The social media stuff is on here. Please, please stay connected to not only your local board and your broker, but stay connected with Texas Realtors. We have lots and lots of great information. So thanks again, Lori. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, Jef. And thanks, by the way, Jef, not just for being here today and for serving tomorrow on your thing, but man, thanks for giving and dedicating some of your time to volunteering to lead the association. We super, super appreciate that too. I think he's on mute, but I think he said thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Awesome. All right, Travis, Lori, again, Jef, thank you all so much for being here. We are right on time. It's about 2 more minutes. So unless you don't have anything else you want to say for 2 minutes, Travis, we're going to wrap everybody up and get out of here early.
We're good. Thank you for having us, Melissa.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.